All right, let's get it, guys. How you guys doing, man? All good? All right, give me actually one more minute. I'll be right back. All right, here we go. What's up, guys? Let's get right into it. Let's see where we headed. How y'all weekend was, man? Talk to me. Y'all ready for the market? All right, this is last week's work, man. We may have to do some updates here. This is all last week's work, and we did not reach TP2. So let's go ahead and start making some updates here with everything. See what we got going on. How we looking? Yo, what's good? What's good, guys? We got see what we got going on. How we looking? We got Dennis. What's going on, Dennis? Lewis, Jerry. What's going on, y'all boys? We're getting ready to lock in right now. So first thing first, I need to update because this is all last week's work. I wouldn't say the signal is still valid anymore. We have to kind of basically get a clean view. So I'm gonna go ahead and delete all of these except for that big ass order block right there. Last week, this is how we started last week. So we go from here, delete that. Delete this one as well. We're gonna leave this one. Let's go ahead and delete all of our lines here just so we can have a better perspective of what's going on. The reason I didn't delete all of it right away is because I wanted to see how price is going to react when it's around its zone here. Alright, let's go ahead and remove this TV3. We're gonna remove all of this for now. It may still go, but it's a new week. So let's clear everything out. Alright, the more we clear everything out, the better it gives us a chance to potentially see another direction if price is wanting to do a different direction and bias. Alright, right here we still have support zone here. I'm going to drag it and open a big support zone right here. Okay, I'm gonna delete this. Alright, this support zone is matching the daily, but I'm going to have it match the previous candle, which is right here from that previous candle close right here. And we're going to have it just like that. And then from there, let's go ahead and go in the H4 time frame, see what's going on. Zoom in a bit. All right, let's go, man. What's up, guys? I see Tweezy in here. Rejas, welcome, man. Let's get it. Cherry, Mark, Lewis, let's go. Locked in. Let's see what we got. All right, so the sell on gold is pretty strong. I have to admit that. It's been strong like that for a little minute. It just haven't been able to just go. So we haven't fully figured out what's gonna happen just yet. We going to in a little bit. But right now, price is really trying to push down for more sales. Since market open after the gap up. After the gap up, it started to look for more sales. But we don't know for sure the full direction because the gap broke the middle Bollinger Band on the H1 time frame. So I was looking at that and I was noticing, that's interesting to see because price may just go ahead and try to reach this area here, which is top Bollinger Band H1 time frame and also 30-minute time frame. So this is how it's looking right now overall. As you guys could see, price is sitting at a nice 50 MA area, which is a strong support zone. This could potentially push price to go test towards this area one more time, potentially breaks it. If it breaks it, then we're going to this take profit here, an average daily high up there. Reason for it is because I'm noticing price on the H1 time frame and the 30-minute time frame. I'm noticing price already broke through the middle Bollinger Band at the top here, unless price was doing this as a completely final retest. That's the only way that retest would be valid. But the fact that price broke that area tells me that it may want to go to fully give a full retest at the top Bollinger Band on the 30-minute time frame and H1 time frame. So if that happens, that would be a great entry for sales, but we don't want to miss the buy entry down here. If that do not happen, then price is just gonna completely tank and go to H1 bottom Bollinger Band, which is down here. So right now we are in the middle zone. We don't know for sure exactly when and how price is going to go. It's either going to, like I said, break through and go up, test this area for a take profit this week, or break through for a sell to test this area for a sell. All right, buy TP here, sell TP here. It's that simple, but we just need to figure out where it's going to break. And once we figure out where it's going to break, then we take action. Now we are in the right trend to start making that profit. As of right now, it's hard to tell where price is going to actually break as of right now. Right now it's just sort of just pushing for sales, but it's at a low support zone. Let's see on the 5-minute time frame. All right, we are above the moving average from the Ichimoku cloud. 50 MA is crossing 200 in the middle, but the only part is that 50 MA is still red bearish. So until 50 MA fully change all green bullish bullish moving average, then we'll be good, or all green bullish candles here. As of right now, I'm not in any trades because I haven't fully figured out the direction fully to know if it's a buy or sell. I just have to take profits based on Bollinger Bands on the H1 time frame and 30-minute time frame. So that's pretty much where we at right now. But we're going to soon get our major breakout, and as price goes, we're going to see more if it's going to go towards the bottom Bollinger Band or the top Bollinger Band, because overall for the week, These are our take profit zone. If I go ahead and hide all my analysis and I hide all my indicators, all right, let's just hide the analysis. We'll leave the indicator on. Okay, look, this week is simple. It's very simple. All right, either we're going to get, because remember, Jackpot strategy, okay, is based on zone to zone and moving averages. Okay, zone to zone moving averages. We use the moving averages from the Ichimoku cloud to give us more accurate information, and also the 10 and 50 MA. All right, based on that information here, all right, what I can see here, price is in the middle zone, and let's keep in mind that this is the middle Bollinger Band zone area where I just drew. Okay, this is the top Bollinger Band on the H1. This would be represented as a take profit, TP, for a buy. And this is an area of take profit as well. This would represent as take profit, TP, for the sell. Now, your job as a trader is very simple. Your job as a trader is to figure out which direction is going to go to, which is more likely to happen based on other confirmations, based on different time frame. Which one is more likely to happen? Would it be this week for it to go up for a buy to reach final destination, take profit, top Bollinger Band here? Or would it be for a sell for price to hit take profit, bottom Bollinger Band here? So once we're here and we're looking at this, we understand, okay, there's two things that can only happen, buy or sell. Our job is simple. Figure out which one is going to be most likely and enter the trade. Now, here's a cheat code. If you don't fully know, so you need to just wait for a breakout to happen between the Jackpot strategy key zone. We have key zone entry high. We have key zone entry low. What always happen every week, every time, price is fully going to break out either for a buy, passing the key zone, passing this area to go up. Once that happened, once price breaks this key zone where it stopped at from the gap, then you know we could go towards take profit all the way at the top of Bollinger Band. This would be take profit 1, take profit 2. If price decides to go instead below this key zone here that I just marked, then we could expect price to go down for a sell. And the cool thing about the Jackpot strategy is that you know the exact destination of where it's going to. This is what's going to kind of help you to be able to stay in your trade, to be able to swing trade as well. So if price showed me this confirmation where it's breaking key zone entry low, this area right here, then I know, okay, I could expect price to continue going, reaching take profit 1 for the sell here at the average daily range low from the Jackpot strategy. It gives you the take profit zone. And then final take profit, bottom Bollinger Band on the H1 time frame. Now, of course, it's going to take time to happen, but what's cool is as it's happening, you're going to be able to see what's actually going on in the market and be able to capitalize on it. Because once you know the destination, once you know where you're going, the only next big part about it is how do you enter? How do you get on the bus? How do you get on the train to go there, right? So this week, we need to focus on growing our accounts. How do we get in the train to go to the destination? If we're going for a buy, how do we enter to go here for a buy? If we're going for a sell, how do we enter to go here for a sell? You take a big loss when you get on the wrong train. So if you take a sell and price go up against you, you lose a lot. All right? If you take a buy and it sells, price go against you, you lose a lot. So your main job is, as a trader, is to figure out which direction is more likely. Now, your goal is not to, be correct and be 100% correct. Your goal is to have a certain amount of trades, a certain amount of attempts, probability, of how many trades you're going to take to actually go towards that direction you think may happen. Now, it's going to be a crazy market, guys. All right, there's already world war. We're going to actually watch some news real quick of actually what happened over the weekend, because the U.S. attacked Iran, and this can affect the market. We don't know how. We just have to be on our toes and be prepared. So I'm going to pull up some things right now. It's going to say USA attack. Let's just see what's going on, which could kind of give us a better idea of what type of move we need to be making in the market. All right, this was breaking news 1 day ago, 4 million views.
This is a Fox News alert. News from the President of the United States that there has been an attack inside Iran. Just moments ago, President Donald Trump putting out on Truth Social, we have completed our very successful attack on 3 nuclear sites in Iran, including Fordo, Natanz, and Esfahan. All planes are now outside of Iran airspace. Again, this from President Donald Trump. A full payload of bombs was dropped on the primary site, Fordo. All planes are safely on their way home. Congratulations to our great American warriors. There is not another military in the world that could have done this. Now is the time for peace. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Again, that's just seconds ago from President Donald Trump on Truth Social, suggesting that those B-2 bombers that perhaps were on the way may have been behind this. We'll get more details on these 3 sites that the president said has been attacked inside Iran. This comes after days of negotiations to try to get Iran to the negotiating table. The President of the United States saying it would have to be unconditional surrender, saying enrichment would have to stop. We heard from negotiations in Europe that that was not being accepted by the Iranians, that they would not stop enriching uranium. There was a thought that this could go as long as 2 weeks. As the president said, he would decide within 2 weeks. However, 2 days is within 2 weeks. And now word from President Donald Trump that these attacks have happened. Again, interesting that 3 sites have been struck by U.S. bombers. And this, again, we'll get more information about the exact targets and what bombs were used. We expect that the GBU-57, the bunker buster, the massive penetrator bomb, may have been one of those used. Fordo is a nuclear facility inside Iran that is roughly a half-mile deep underneath a rock mountain-like facility that has been said to be the site of a lot of the enrichment capability. Esfahan, believed to be a storage facility for enriched uranium, and Natanz, another part of the nuclear facilities. They have several throughout Iran. It has been long described as a very difficult and tedious effort to go after these nuclear sites, but the U.S. for the first time launching an attack inside Iran. Again, the President of the United States saying all of the planes are out of Iranian airspace. The bombings do continue by the Israelis inside Iran as this back and forth volley between Israel and Iran has continued for some 2 weeks. We expect to hear more about this operation, not only from the Pentagon, but perhaps from the White House, although the White House this evening rather, has called a lid, as far as meaning no one will talk after that. That may be changing now. Obviously, we have this Truth Social post from President Donald Trump.
¿Necesitas más? Más potencia, más control. Necesitas hosting VPS de Hostinger. Dile adiós a las limitaciones del servidor y accede a más. Más almacenamiento, más memoria, más ancho.
That's crazy, guys. Shit.
The Trump administration has bombed Iran with strikes President Trump claimed.
Let's look at the market.
Wartime president.
Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier.
In the White House Situation Room with his top security officials, President Trump, making the final decision to attack, had to calculate what the consequences might be. Will airstrikes against Iran's nuclear sites result in attacks on US forces that could start a full-scale war? In these pictures from Isfahan, you can see and hear the airstrikes hitting one of the 3 nuclear sites attacked. Iran obviously knew this was a possibility, but may not have been expecting it so soon. President Trump had said he would take up to 2 weeks to decide whether to take military action. At the Pentagon, they want to say this operation is already over. Iran should not respond.
The operation President Trump planned was bold, and it was brilliant, showing the world that American deterrence is back. When this president speaks, the world should listen.
This Pentagon map shows warplanes taking off from Missouri in the American heartland and flying a 40-hour round trip to deliver their enormous munitions, 14 bunker buster bombs. What damage did they do? These satellite photographs show the underground nuclear site at Fordo before and then after the airstrikes. The B-2 bombers totally obliterated the site, claimed Donald Trump. The US military haven't actually made a final assessment, but say the facility has been severely damaged, not destroyed. Iran has said it will respond in self-defense. It hasn't said how.
It is an outrageous, grave, and unprecedented violation of the fundamental principles of the Charter of the United Nations and international law. The warmongering and lawless administration in Washington is solely and fully responsible for the dangerous consequences and far-reaching implications of its act of aggression.
World leaders have hastily convened crisis meetings in international capitals, aware that a growing conflict would affect them all. The UN Security Council is in emergency session, deeply concerned about military escalation in the Middle East.
The people of the region cannot endure another cycle of destruction. And yet, we now risk descending into a rat hole of retaliation after retaliation.
The US Congress was not consulted before the strikes. The president can take limited military actions without it. Only Congress can authorize going to war. Democrats claim Mr. Trump has acted unconstitutionally.
This is the U.S. jumping into a war of choice at Donald Trump's urging, without any compelling national security interest for the United States to act in this way, particularly without a debate and vote in Congress.
As these B-2 bombers are seen returning to their American base, their commanders don't know if they have undertaken a specific, limited mission or started a war. How will Iran retaliate for these airstrikes, and what will the US do then? This is a delicate and dangerous moment in the Middle East and around the world.
Crazy,
and
guys.
let's talk to Sarah in Washington. What's your sense, Sarah, of whether the Trump administration thinks this operation is over?
Well, as far as they're concerned, yes, they want this to be an end to it, but of course it's not entirely up to them how Iran responds to this, and that's why there is such deep concern all the way around the world that this could easily get out of control with disastrous consequences that would actually go beyond the Middle East. You've got the leaders, for instance, of Britain, France and Germany coming together to urge Iran not to do anything that would further destabilize the region, because, just think about it, Iran could, in retaliation, easily try to hit one of the many nearby US bases. If any Americans were to be killed, Donald Trump would feel compelled to respond to that, and you can see easily how this could then begin to escalate. It's important also to watch what's being said from Russia and from China, because those are allies of Iran. So far, both countries have condemned the airstrikes and said that they've breached international law. But they also are urging a return to diplomacy, not more fighting, and neither of them have given any indication so far that they would do anything to help Iran, which is important when we look at the way that this could possibly escalate around the world.
Sarah, thank you for now. Sarah Smith. Well, more than 100 US warplanes, including stealth bombers, were used to carry out the attacks, codenamed Operation Midnight Hammer. As we've heard, President Trump said in his TV address that Iran's nuclear facilities were obliterated. Our security analyst Gordon Carrera has been working with BBC Verify to assess whether that really is the case.
American B-2 stealth bombers returning home today after a strike that took Iran and the world by surprise, and having dropped weapons never used before in conflict. One group of B-2s had flown from their base in the US out west towards the Pacific. They were a decoy. 7 more flew east for 18 hours, refueling on the way, minimizing their communications to stay silent. Just before they reached Iran, a US submarine launched more than 24 missiles towards a nuclear site at Isfahan. Then the B-2s entered Iranian airspace, apparently without being spotted, before striking 2 more target areas. That included dropping 14 so-called massive ordnance penetrators, or bunker buster bombs.
Final battle damage will take some time, but initial battle damage assessments indicate that all 3 sites sustained extremely severe damage and destruction.
So, how successful were the US strikes? The key target was a place called Fordo. The B-2 bombers flew a route that took them high above the site where Iran enriches uranium, which could be used in nuclear bombs. It's buried in tunnels and deep under a mountain. Now, this is what Fordo looked like before the attack. And this image, confirmed by BBC Verify, is just hours after the strike. And you can see over here these holes. That looks like where the bombs impacted before burrowing down and then exploding. And the white you can see around it is probably concrete dust thrown up by the resulting explosion. Now, here is the Isfahan site before the bombing, and this is what it looks like now. So far, the International Atomic Energy Agency says it's seen no radiation leaking from the sites. And one possibility is that that's because the nuclear material might not have been there. These images were taken just a couple of days before the attack at Fordo, and they show a large number of trucks. It's possible they could have moved some of the uranium, as Iran has claimed. This was Natanz nuclear facility before the attack. And the question is whether after it, Iran retains the nuclear material, equipment and scientists, some of whom have been killed, to rebuild or even race for a nuclear bomb. If so, then we may see even more strikes.
There is no doubt this attack is a violation of the United Nations Charter, and as well as one aggression, armed aggression to the Iranian national sovereignty and Iranian territorial integrity.
But international law will not stop this conflict escalating. Iran could hit back by firing missiles at US bases in neighboring Iraq or in Bahrain or Qatar. It could even close the Strait of Hormuz. That's an economically vital route through which shipping and especially oil flows. As American B-2s landed back at base in Missouri, this mission may be over. But the war they are now part of may only have just begun. Gordon Carrera, BBC News.
Well, we can talk now to our economics editor, Faisal Islam, and our political editor, Chris Mason. And Faisal, picking up on what Gordon was saying there, I mean, that threat to potentially close the Straits of Hormuz, I mean, that would have a huge economic impact, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. We're on the pathway to potential serious economic consequences. The interesting thing is, up until this point, over the past couple of weeks, since Israel and Iran started trading missiles, we have had a pretty calm markets. Oil price up about 9%, which would have had an impact on price, but definitely not any sort of crisis. The oil markets open in about an hour and all focus on some words coming out of Tehran from the parliament, not from the government, saying that they will close the straits. Now, what does that actually mean? It depends. There are some reasons why you might think Tehran would have some restraint here. They export their oil to China, for example. We're already seeing the Americans saying to China, you need to talk to the Iranians, tell them not to do this. But you get 20% of the world's oil, 20% of the world's gas coming from Qatar, increasingly important for Europe since the Russia-Ukraine war. All of this obviously depends on the cycle of diplomatic and military escalation too, but unlike Russia-Ukraine, in this case, it wouldn't be a side product of the conflict. This would be a weapon in Iran's armory to try and internationalize the crisis through the world economy.
All right, let's see what goes about to do now.
We'll pick up Chris on
it's
Saran
pretty
in a
low.
moment. Before I talk to you, though, let's just hear a little of Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, with some of his responses just a little earlier today.
We've long had
definitely
dropped the Iranian nuclear program and been very clear that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. The US has now taken action to alleviate that threat. It is important that we now de-escalate the situation, stabilise the region, and get the parties back around the table to negotiate.
That was part of what he said earlier. And Chris, I mean, really treading quite a difficult line here.
Yeah, so the Prime Minister has spoken to President Trump tonight, but crucially, Jane, there wasn't that call beforehand, which could have been demanding a yes or no answer from the Prime Minister. In other words, whether the UK was willing to get involved in any way. So, for instance, granting permission to use the airbase at Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. And that would have been a real dilemma for the Prime Minister, because on the one hand, he's been talking about de-escalation, the suggestion that there were concerns raised privately about the legal basis for being involved. So saying yes would have been difficult, but then saying no would have been difficult when he's been assiduously building a relationship with President Trump. So how do we assess the UK's position tonight? It is willing the ends that America is pursuing, which is removing Iran's nuclear threat, but it is conspicuously not explicitly endorsing the means, in other words, America's attacks. Now, the Conservatives say that this is equivocation, that it is moral cowardice. President Trump was openly dismissive earlier in the weekend on European efforts at diplomacy. Those efforts, though, continue. As I say, the Prime Minister talking to the President by phone tonight. The Foreign Secretary has spoken to Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, during the attacks while they were taking place, and again today, as well as speaking to the Iranians, the Israelis, and others. The UK position is one that diplomacy is the long-term path to a long-term solution that ensures that Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons. The thing is, America wasn't willing to listen to Europe beforehand. The question now is whether it will be willing to listen in the future. And in the next couple of days, President Trump, the Prime Minister, and plenty of others is getting together at the NATO summit in the Netherlands to work out what to do next, amongst other things.
Chris, thanks very much. Chris Mason, Faisal Islam, thank you. Well, Iran's president has said that his country won't be bullied and that the US must receive a response to its aggression. So what are the options now for Iran's leaders? The BBC isn't currently allowed to broadcast from inside the country, but the BBC has a Persian service that reports on what's happening there. This report is from Shirvas Ardalan of the BBC Persian service here in London.
In the center of the crowd, Iran's president, surrounded by hundreds of party faithful, venting their fury at the United States.
Oh, shit.
What America did is truly unforgivable, says this woman. Iran is stronger than they perceive. But after last night's US attacks, the regime here is seriously weakened. So what comes next? The Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei could swallow his pride and possibly save his regime and the country from further damage. Or he could fight on and risk everything. Domestic public opinion is now divided and confused.
The response must be firm and decisive. What's at stake here is the very identity of being Iranian.
In my opinion, Iran needs to engage in some reflection and contemplation.
As for the country's Revolutionary Guard, it responded by saying US military bases in the region are vulnerable. But they know retaliation would invite further US attacks. This is a state TV reporter who went to Fordo. I can't see much damage, he says. For now, it's America's word against Iran's. Weakened and humiliated, the Iranian regime will struggle to maintain its credibility and grip on power in the face of widespread discontent. Siavash Ardalan, BBC News.
Well, some people in Iran have chosen to cross to bordering countries. Our correspondent Orla Girian reports now from Turkey's border with Iran at the Kapikoy border crossing, where she's been speaking to people as they arrive.
Turkey's border with Iran, flanked by mountains, and now a gateway to and from a country under attack. At the Kapikoy crossing this morning, we found movement in both directions. Some fleeing the bombing by Israel and America, others rushing back home to be with loved ones. Amir, a retired British Iranian, had just fled Tehran.
And what was your feeling when you got across the border here?
Feeling relieved, really, to be honest with you. I feel relieved, yes.
How dangerous was the situation in
It
Tehran?
is very dangerous. It is bad. The sky belongs to the Israelis. So they can do what they like. They're just coming in, they just bombing out. And nothing there to stop them. Because they've got the sky, and that's it.
Very scary for you.
Very, very scary for everyone.
Amir says he got out with no help from the British Embassy.
But all of a sudden, embassies closed, staff are gone, phones cut off, and nobody answered. So I had to get my way out of the country. That's the way I'm here now.
You had to come on your own?
I had to, yes.
This is what he left behind, a country under fire, a regime that is holding on, and a war that may now escalate. But some, like 13-year-old Dariush, are hoping that a new Iran may emerge from the ashes. He crossed the border today with his younger brother and his mother. He told me he'll go home if change comes. God willing, Iran will be free. Soon all of us will live in freedom, he says, and the Islamic Republic will be gone. But among those going back into Iran today, there was more caution. We found no one willing to speak on camera. One man told us, "We're too afraid."
Well, in the last half an hour or so, we've seen a few more people coming out from Iran, bringing their suitcases. What we witnessed today was not a flood. By and large, it was people leaving who had the means to do so, who had a place to go to. One man told us he had friends and relatives who wanted to leave, but didn't have passports and couldn't get out. Now, on the critical question of what happens to the regime, we heard very differing opinions. One government employee who was going back in said he believed the regime would fall in the end, not now, but he feared that at that point there would be a takeover by the military. A younger man said to us, look, the leadership has hung on for decades, they can probably hang on now. And even among those who were hoping for change, wishing for change, believing it would come, there were also fears being expressed about how many people might be killed. And tonight, just across the border behind me inside Iran, no one has any idea what is coming next. And that holds true across the region.
Orla, thank you. Orla Girian. As we've heard, Iran says it's keeping all options open in terms of retaliation, but its immediate response today was to launch more missile strikes on Israel, which began direct hostilities when it attacked Iran 10 days ago. Iranian missiles struck Haifa and Tel Aviv, injuring more than 80 people. Tonight, President Netanyahu has said Israel will keep going until it achieves its goals. Lucy Williamson reports from Tel Aviv.
Iran once saw its ballistic missiles as a deterrent against Israeli attacks. But even the intense barrage that shook Israel this morning isn't shaking Israeli support for the war. A nearby care home slowly evacuated, room by room. 10 days into this war, Israel's Prime Minister is determined to continue.
Everyone is kind of
may be
like,
turned to
damn,
rubble,
seeing what's going to happen.
but there's no crack in public support.
There's a lot going on,
We got out
guys.
of bed and we went to the safe room, heard a tremendous boom. When we came back, we saw our apartment was not our.
My work is easy because I use ClickUp. Here's how I get perfect notes from every meeting. I click this toggle to send my AI note taker to my meetings.
The United States has carried out massive precision strikes on 3 key nuclear facilities in Iran, obliterating them, in his words. We've seen a number of explosions over Tel Aviv and Jerusalem in the past few hours after Iran launched a missile attack. Israel says a number of areas were hit in the north and center of the country, with at least 16 casualties reported. Well, Israel says a number of areas were hit in the north and center of the country, with those casualties reported, and 30 missiles in total were managed to breach the Israeli defense shield. Sirens sounded in several regions as Israel's defensive systems operated to intercept the threat. These pictures show some of the damage from Iranian attacks. Well, we'll be hearing more on that in just a moment or two, but first let's take a listen once again to President Trump. During an address at the White House, he said future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier if Iran does not make peace.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime, Fordow, Natanz, and Esfahan. Everybody heard those names for years as they built this horribly destructive enterprise. Our objective was the destruction of Iran's nuclear enrichment capacity and a stop to the nuclear threat posed by the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace. If they do not, future attacks will be far greater and a lot easier. For 40 years, Iran has been saying death to America, death to Israel. They have been killing our people, blowing off their arms, blowing off their legs with roadside bombs. That was their specialty. We lost over 1,000 people, and hundreds of thousands throughout the Middle East and around the world have died as a direct result of their hate. In particular, so many were killed by their general, Qasem Soleimani. I decided a long time ago that I would not let this happen. It will not continue. I want to thank and congratulate Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu. We worked as a team like perhaps no team has ever worked before. And we've gone a long way to erasing this horrible threat to Israel. I want to thank the Israeli military for the wonderful job they've done. And most importantly, I want to congratulate the great American patriots who flew those magnificent machines tonight, and all of the United States military on an operation the likes of which the world has not seen in many, many decades. Hopefully, we will no longer need their services in this capacity. I hope that's so. I also want to congratulate the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Raisin-Kane, spectacular general, and all of the brilliant military minds involved in this attack. With all of that being said, this cannot continue. There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left. Tonight's was the most difficult of them all, by far, and perhaps the most lethal. But if peace does not come quickly, we will go after those other targets with precision, speed, and skill. Most of them can be taken out in a matter of minutes. There's no military in the world that could have done what we did tonight, not even close. There has never been a military that could do what took place just a little while ago. Tomorrow, General Kane, Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth will have a press conference at 8 a.m. at the Pentagon. And I want to just thank everybody, and in particular, God, I want to just say we love you, God, and we love our great military. Protect them. God bless the Middle East. God bless Israel, and God bless America. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, as you heard there, President Trump said that 3 key sites were...
Sheesh. Man. Like, no one know what to expect at this point, guys. Like, I mean, we all experiencing this at the same time. None of us been there before. So it's all we could do, bro, is just lock in with ourselves, man. Get to know God, man. Get to know yourself. And just do our best in the market, man. That's all we could do. Try to make as much bread as we can in the markets. Take advantage of everything that's going on. And just be safe. Do your best to keep yourself safe and your family, man. It's tough. It's a crazy situation.
were hit in Iran. Let's take a closer look at them. They were at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. President Trump said that Iran's facilities had been, in his words, completely obliterated. Well, Isfahan is a uranium conversion plant, whilst Natanz is an enrichment plant. And even before the US strikes, the International Atomic Energy Agency, that's the UN nuclear watchdog, said that Natanz had sustained severe damage. But the main site hit this morning was Fordow. The uranium enrichment site is situated about 60 miles, that's about 100 kilometers south of the Iranian capital, Tehran. It is located in a mountainous region. It's thought to consist of 2 main tunnels that house centrifuges used to enrich uranium, as well as a network of smaller tunnels. Reaching this underground installation, which is at least 60 meters below ground, required more powerful bunker-busting bombs, which only the US has. Its official name is the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator, and the only planes that could carry such bombs are B-2 stealth bombers, which were indeed involved today. Senior Department of Defense officials confirmed that the bomb was used in the attacks, with 2 being deployed for each of the 3 nuclear targets. Well, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu spoke after the strikes, praising President Trump for the decision and for the US support for Israel.
Congratulations, President Trump. Your bold decision to target Iran's nuclear facilities with the awesome and righteous might of the United States will change history. In Operation Rising Lion, Israel has done truly amazing things. But in tonight's action against Iran's nuclear facilities, America has been truly unsurpassed.
That goes by the tank, guys.
It has done what no other country on earth could do.
How are we going to take advantage of
History
this?
will record that President Trump acted to deny the world's most dangerous regime, the world's most dangerous weapons. His leadership today has created a pivot of history that can help lead the Middle East and beyond to a future of prosperity and peace. President Trump and I often say, peace through strength. First comes strength, then comes peace. And tonight, President Trump and the United States acted with a lot of strength. President Trump, I thank you. The people of Israel thank you. The forces of civilization thank you. God bless America, God bless Israel, and may God bless our unshakable alliance, our unbreakable faith.
A delighted Benjamin Netanyahu there, but even despite the American bombing this morning, the war absolutely goes on. A little earlier, Israel confirmed that 30 Iranian missiles were fired towards Israel. We heard the sirens here, we heard the the alert, we went down to our bunker very quickly for some 40 minutes, and you can see here the live pictures in Haifa in northern Israel. That's pretty close to the Lebanese border. That was one of the areas that saw direct hits of those Iranian missiles. The Israelis are now saying that there were 10 direct impacts of the Iranian missiles that got through, and at least 16 people are injured. It is reported that one of these sirens failed in Haifa to warn of an interceptor going up, and so that could potentially have explained some of the injuries up there. Here in Tel Aviv as well, there were missiles which we heard around our hotel. Our hotel shook a little bit, and we heard the whistle of the interceptions. This is the skyline now live here in Tel Aviv as Israelis wake up and try to comprehend the scale of what is happening. Let us turn now to Trita Parsi, who is Executive Vice President at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, a think tank that advocates for a U.S. foreign policy centered on diplomacy and military restraint. Trita Parsi, I would venture that diplomacy and military restraint is quite the opposite of what we have seen this morning.
Certainly, this was an illegal attack, a violation of Article 56 of the Additional Protocol to the Geneva Convention, and done in a manner that really makes a mockery of diplomacy, because there was still an opportunity to be able to strike a deal that would be far more effective than this. We still don't know exactly what damage has been done, but it does appear extremely unlikely that the Iranian nuclear program has truly been eliminated, and that results most likely that there will be continued bombing and not this kind of a one and done that Trump seems to have envisioned.
And yet, diplomacy only really works when both sides are willing to sit down and talk. And what we've had from Iran over the last few days has been not only a complete pushback, not only saying that they're unwilling to negotiate under bombardment, but saying that Europe's proposals were completely unworkable, refusing to roll back enrichment to 0%. So do you actually believe that there was any chance of getting the Iranians to engage in meaningful diplomacy?
Certainly. I mean, I would remind your viewers that, of course, the United Kingdom kept on saying that that Ukraine should not have to negotiate while it was being bombarded. So it seems to be the very same logic that the Iranians have applied here. I nevertheless think that it was a mistake of them, not that they didn't talk to the Europeans, because I don't think they're that relevant in this equation any longer, but rather that they refused to engage directly with the United States. I think it would have been much better if they had done so. But when it comes to the requirement of zero enrichment, which incidentally the Europeans had abandoned more than 15 years ago and were trying to convince the United States to drop as well, because they recognized correctly that as long as that was the negotiating position or the red line of the West, it would never be a deal. And the only time we've had a deal is when the West actually accepted that there would be restricted enrichment taking place in Iran under strict inspections rather than pushing for zero. When Trump started this negotiation, he had not adopted the zero enrichment position. That's the Israeli red line. His red line was no weaponization. That's part of the reason why the negotiations actually were successful at first. Halfway through, he shifted the goalpost and adopted the Israeli red line of zero enrichment. And it's since then that we have seen this trajectory towards military confrontation, which was highly predictable.
Trita, we've just had a comment from Rafael Grossi, head of the UN nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, who has said that there will be an emergency meeting of the agency on Monday. What is your fear now in terms of how Iran might try to utilize what remains of its nuclear know-how? Because, of course, facilities can be destroyed.
This could be a major low area, too. That's why I'm
and
very,
whether they will actually try to rush to weaponize if they were not already doing so.
Comeback for a buy, or
well, there's no evidence that they were doing so. I think it's important to remind the viewers of that, and Ai has testified to that. I do fear, however, that that is a very likely outcome, that this is the natural reaction that they would have, as almost any other country would have, to this type of an attack. Of course, there's other things that they may do in the medium, which is, for instance, walking out of the NPT altogether. which would mean that the IAEA would no longer have any access to what is happening inside of Iran's nuclear program because they would be kicking out all of the inspectors. All of these things were predictable and part of the reason why the IAEA, as well as nuclear experts and non-proliferation experts throughout have warned about this only looking as a success in the short term, but in the long term actually being a failure. This is exactly what happened when the Israelis bombed the Iraqi nuclear reactor of Sirak in 1981. At first it looked as a great success, but later on we learned that as a result of this, Saddam Hussein quadrupled his nuclear budget. And had he not invaded Kuwait in August 1991, had he only waited 6 months or so, he would have actually had a nuclear weapon. And the world had no idea what was going on in the Iraqi nuclear program at the time.
And yet, critics of Iran would say, well, look, enrichment at 60%, which is where Iran was at, in enriching about 400 kilograms of uranium to 60%, there is no other need for that. There is no need in terms of energy, in terms of medical use for enrichment at that level, apart from trying to make a nuclear warhead. And get that coupled with the extremely secretive behavior of the Iranian regime with regards to nuclear weapons inspections over the years means that, you know, Iran has maybe not brought today on itself, but I mean there was absolutely no trust remaining between Western governments and certainly the Israeli government and Iran.
Well, the Israeli government is not part of these arrangements because it is a nuclear weapons state that is not part of the NPT. So that's not really a factor here. It is absolutely true that there is no civilian use of 60% enriched uranium, and that this was very clear that this was part of what the Iranians viewed as their leverage that they would negotiate away. Already in the very beginning of these negotiations that Trump conducted, the Iranians agreed to go down to 3.67%, which then negates almost everything else that was part of the premise of your question. Because that was part of the negotiation to get rid of that. And that option still existed. The United States and Israel chose to start war instead of actually fulfilling these negotiations.
Trita Parsi, Executive Vice President at the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us here on BBC News. Well, let's turn to our Chief North America correspondent, Gary O'Donoghue, who is live with us from Washington. Gary, it's still early where you are, of course, but I'm sure it's been a fairly sleepless night for all of you, just as it has been for us. Just give us your sense of the enormity of what we are seeing here, that an American president who campaigned on America first and ending the eternal wars has now actually done what was the unthinkable and attacked Iran.
Yeah, and I think there is some surprise here that this has come around so quickly, particularly, Mark, after that 2-week deadline that the president issued on Thursday through his press secretary. We know that after that, of course, there was some meetings in Europe with the Iranians, and yesterday the Iranian foreign minister speaking as well. So it's possible that those public statements, along with what the Americans were hearing through the back channels, made them make up their mind pretty quickly that Iran wasn't going to, that it backed itself into a position in the same way as, in some ways, Donald Trump has backed himself into a position setting these deadlines. So that's all kind of in the mix at the moment. There is some criticism coming from Democrats in Congress, as you can imagine. I think the question will be to what extent this split in Donald Trump's base over attacking Iran and getting involved in another foreign war, as it's put, how much that will fracture further as a result of this. One thing I think is worth bearing in mind, Donald Trump, the other day said really that, ground troops, putting boots on the ground was somewhere you really didn't want to go ever. And I wonder whether he's starting to think that perhaps using these bombers at tens of thousands of feet, using these missiles fired from submarines miles and miles away, is a sort of step short of really breaking his promise or getting involved in that sense. I think that may be a pretty optimistic view, because certainly where you are, there's clearly no doubt that America is now a combatant in this conflict.
Gary, given that this is very much a unilateral American move alongside Israel, i.e. not in cooperation with America's Western partners. Can we read anything into the fact that the B-2 bombers were deployed to Guam, to the US overseas territory, and which is very far away from Iran, and not, for example, to Diego Garcia, the base in the Indian Ocean that Britain still effectively runs and allows America to operate from? Can we read anything into that in terms of the Americans trying to avoid a kind of a diplomatic collision with the Brits about this?
I think that's possible, although what I would say is that Donald Trump is unlike previous US presidents. He doesn't feel he needs that kind of cover from his allies. If he's going to do something, he doesn't mind doing it alone. Much of his foreign policy is about America first, and some people say America alone. So I'm not entirely sure. I mean, clearly that would have put the British government in a pretty difficult position, and maybe it didn't want to do that. David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, was here last week, and he went off to Geneva to deliver a pretty tough message to the Iranians after having met with the National Security Council people here in Washington. America has these various options militarily, flying these B-2s, and of course they can refuel in the air. They can, be refueled in the air, so they can span the globe, quite frankly, independently. So that may well have been a factor. We'll learn, I think, in the coming days. And Mark, we're expecting in probably about 3 or 4 hours from now, a briefing from the Pentagon. The Pentagon doesn't do briefings anymore, basically, but the Defense Secretary, the Secretary of Defense, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs are going to stand up at 8 o'clock local time, and they will be asked a lot of questions by journalists in that room, and I'm sure that will be among them. And also, what kind, with what confidence can they at this stage say what they've achieved? Because obviously this was done at night time. They've got to wait for the satellite imagery to come in. They have other means as well of trying to bottom out what they've actually achieved. But the president, described it as a sort of total success within minutes of it happening. And I think people will feel that the jury's a little bit out on that right now until there's some more concrete evidence.
Yeah, let's see what's going on. Vote is on its way up right now. Let's see.
Shopify is a platform that helps entrepreneurs get started down the path they want. Sometimes starting a business can be scary. I feel like I lost a little piece of my...
Good afternoon. I'm Hallie Jackson in Washington, and we are coming on the air with live coverage of the fallout from last night's historic American strikes on those Iranian nuclear facilities as the U.S. enters the war now between Israel and Iran with the bombing of those nuclear sites. It's the first time the U.S. has ever bombed Iran directly in such a manner. The Pentagon today calling this Operation Midnight Hammer and revealing some new information about how this attack unfolded with 30,000-pound so-called bunker buster bombs capable of destroying targets deep underground. The Defense Secretary and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying the Iranian nuclear program was damaged, was devastated by the attack, with officials calling it the biggest B-2 strike in American history, with still some questions today about what that damage really looked like and how this affected Iranian nuclear capabilities. The Trump administration is making clear their goal has not been regime change, but instead the destruction of these nuclear capabilities, with some of these comments here from Vice President Vance this morning. Listen to this.
We're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program. What we did is we destroyed the Iranian nuclear program. I think we set that program back substantially, and we did it without endangering the lives of the American pilots.
Right now, you've got the American military bracing for potential retaliation from Iran, with senior White House and defense officials saying the next 48 hours in particular are what they are watching most closely. Just moments ago, we saw the Department of Homeland Security out with a new bulletin warning of a heightened threat environment after the strikes. Here's the question, though. What does such a retaliation look like? Would it target Americans overseas? Iran has threatened that. Specifically, they have threatened targeting U.S. military bases in the region. Could there be some kind of domestic component as well? We're going to get into all of it with our team coverage this afternoon. But I want to start with our chief White House correspondent, Peter Alexander. And Peter, on this topic of retaliation, the president is again making clear late this afternoon that depending on the Iranian response, the U.S. is prepared to strike again, perhaps even more forcefully. Peter.
That's exactly right. We first heard that warning from President Trump in those remarks to the country and to the world last night from here at the White House, again posting via social media, making clear that any retaliation will be met with strikes and attacks of far greater force going forward. The president saying that Iran is the bully of the Middle East initially, and saying any future strikes would be greater and would be much easier, saying that they could happen within minutes. So that's the key top line as we focus on the issue of retaliation here. Hallie, you pointed out the Department of Homeland Security saying that its threat level hasn't changed formally, but that there is a heightened threat preparedness situation taking place right now as they anticipate the potential for some kind of response. The question is, in what form does that response take place? Will it be Iran itself that tries to retaliate? Would it be Iranian proxies where there is real concerns we are hearing, not just within the Pentagon, but here at the White House, about the potential that proxies, Iranian proxies, try to target not just American interests in that region, but American troops that are either at bases in places like Iraq or perhaps in Qatar and UAE or some other sites that may not have the level of protection that you find in places like Syria there. Separately, there is the issue of us first learning about the secretive strikes and now learning about the success of them. The president touting in a declaration that this was incredibly successful. He said that the 3 nuclear sites, Natanz, Isfahan, and Fordo, that of course is the one we've been speaking about most often, most recently, because it is buried deep beneath a mountain, that they were a complete success and that they were completely and totally obliterated. A bit of a nuance in the language we're hearing from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Dan Kane, today, Hallie, saying that they were severely damaged. It caused severe damage and destruction. He wouldn't go as far as to say they were totally obliterated, acknowledging those are the initial damage assessments. Before they can have a final damage assessment, if they were completely obliterated, it's going to take a bit of time and some intelligence here. And then, of course, there is the political fallout to all of this. There has been some back and forth. Democrats, obviously, greatly frustrated that lawmakers were not included in the decision-making process before the president launched these strikes on Iran. We have heard from some on the left, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, among others, saying this was unconstitutional and saying, in fact, that the president's decision is, in her words, grounds for impeachment. J.D. Vance, the vice president, speaking out today, and you detailed this as well, but I think it's going to get a lot of attention because he said that this is not a strike on Iran, it is a strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, its nuclear capabilities, whether those two, whether there is a distinction without a difference there or whether Iran views it that way. I think that is going to draw a lot of attention as we look ahead going forward.
Peter, you talk about some of the domestic political fallout as well, and President Trump is wading into that in that new online post just minutes ago that you referenced, going after Republican Senator Thomas Massie. Massie, of course, who has come out over the course of the last 15 hours or so questioning the constitutionality of the president's strike, going on TV, for example. He's somebody who has co-sponsored, along with a Democratic member of Congress, this piece of legislation that would require presidents to come before Congress before taking an act or making a strike like this one. You're seeing the president attack Massie here, even in this moment of intense sort of national security peril. Talk through some of that piece of it, Peter, because it seems like that will begin bubbling over in the days to come as well.
Hallie, you're right. Thomas Massie is not a name that most Americans are familiar with, but he does represent publicly a view that many, even within the MAGA world, can appreciate. There are strong divisions within the Make America Great movement between this idea of the president attacking a foreign country like Iran, given the fact throughout his campaign he said that it was his primary goal, his priority, to keep America out of foreign wars. At the same time, the White House says the president has also made clear that it has been his declaration throughout, even as a candidate, that he would not allow Iran to have a nuclear weapon. So then the next question becomes, how close was Iran to the capability to have a nuclear weapon? The White House and Pentagon Secretary have said that they had everything they needed to produce a nuclear weapon, but to be clear, they hadn't produced the weapon itself, with the intelligence community saying it could be as long as a year, or perhaps even more, frankly, for that successful effort to weaponize the bomb, to be able to put that nuclear weapon atop an actual bomb itself. As it goes to the politics here, Steve Bannon notably was one of those last individuals to meet with the president. Speaking to him on Thursday, you and I both have watched Steve Bannon's public comments about this. He has been very clear in his conversations with the president and publicly that he disagreed with the idea of the U.S. getting involved here. He had a pre-scheduled visit with the president on Thursday, roughly around the time that the president made clear that he was going to give the Iranians, within 2 weeks, as he described it, a time frame for him to make a decision whether or not the U.S. would get directly involved here, clearly, or perhaps not clearly, but it appears that that was a decoy, because the first go came from the president on Friday. It was one of 3 separate green lights that he gave to the defense secretary over the course of the next 24 hours or so between Friday and the strikes launching, those B-2 bombers going off and ultimately dropping their munitions on the ground in Iran. Overnight Saturday, early Sunday morning, I should say, in Iran, late Saturday night here. And then the only other detail that I think is worth getting into, Hallie, is just the scope, the total complexity, the extraordinary nature, and the choreography associated with this strike here. As it's been detailed now, there were a total of 75 munitions, including, among others, some Tomahawk missiles that were fired from naval submarines there off the coast. In the waters that surround the Middle East. There were 7 of these B-2 bombers that were involved, dropping a total of 14 of these 30,000-pound bunker-busting bombs that had never been used before in combat, despite preparations for this moment. It's a moment that past presidents had hoped it would not come to, but those are the best details we have about the real complexity. The first set of B-2 bombers that you may remember when you woke up yesterday morning, there were reports that they were heading toward Guam. Those, it appears, were a decoy, as the other B-2 bombs that were involved in the actual strikes headed east, refueling along the way. That's why there were 125 total aircraft involved for this very, very complex operation, Hallie.
Peter Alexander, live for us there on the North Lawn of the White House. Peter, thank you. We'll check back in with you in just a little bit. I want to bring in our senior national security correspondent, Courtney Kuby, who's live for us at the Pentagon. So, Court, you heard Peter talk about the complexity of this operation. The weapons used, these highly sophisticated bunker buster bombs, intentionally meant to get deep into this sort of underground, built inside of a mountain nuclear facility that Iran has. And this question now of just how much damage did those bombs do, not just in Fordo, but in these other 2 Iranian nuclear sites as well. The full assessment, we know, is going to take some time here, but what are you hearing from sources about the devastation or the destruction of Iranian nuclear capabilities?
Yeah, definitely damaged, and we even heard from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs that it was badly damaged, Fordo, as well as the other 2 sites. But as far as a final or a full battle damage assessment, that generally will take several days, especially when you're talking about some place like Iran, Hallie. It's not a place where the U.S. has ground troops or people on the ground who can move in and get eyes on and get photos and do a first-hand assessment of what happened. They're going to rely more on satellite imagery and on overhead assessment, and that's simply just going to take some time. They'll also, I'm sure, use other intelligence gathering methods to figure that out. But you mentioned the complexity of this mission, and that is absolutely the case here. A couple of points just to show just how complex it was. This was only 25 minutes total time on station for all of these 75 munitions to be dropped. So what that means is they had to coordinate launching those Tomahawks, the T-LAMs, from the submarine. They launched more than an hour before the bombs actually dropped from those B-2 bombers. Now, in addition to the bombers, the 125 aircraft, yeah, they were using a number of aerial refuelers, but there were also fighter jets that were up there. Hallie, this is fascinating. They went ahead of the bomber package so that they could essentially draw fire or draw attention from any possible air defense systems on the ground, or if the Iranians scrambled any kind of military jets, they would go towards those fighter jets and the bombers would be able to continue on and continue their mission, dropping those bombs over Fordo and over Natanz. That is a fascinating detail and not something that we often hear in a mission like this.
But yet, Courtney, it doesn't appear from what we've heard from top military officials that Iran had any response at all. To their knowledge, there were no shots fired, nothing fired at the incoming or outgoing planes at any point through this operation, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one reason that they may not have detected them is, number one, a lot of these are stealth capabilities, right? The B-2 bomber, the fighter jets that were likely used were probably had a stealth capability as well. But it's not just that. Remember, back in October, Israel took out a lot of Iran, maybe all of Iran's strategic air defense systems, damaging just about every one of their systems. They've been trying to build it back, but officials don't believe that they were fully back online. And then even just in the last 10 days or so, Israel has also gone after more of their air defense systems, including radars, including the launchers. So they may not have had much of the ability, even if they were able to detect these aircraft, to do anything about it. But I think it is notable that they did not scramble any of their military jets in response to what were potentially dozens of U.S. aircraft breaching Iranian airspace.
Courtney Kuby, live for us there at the Pentagon. Court, thank you very much for your reporting on this. I want to bring in our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, who is live for us in the region. He is in Tel Aviv. Richard, a couple of things for you here. When we talk about the Iranian response, so much of that response will dictate where things go after the next maybe 48, 72 hours or so. Talk through some of the options that Iran has, ranging from what they have already suggested they may do, and that is potentially go after U.S. troops in the region. You're seeing the U.S. issue these very intense warnings, including from the Secretary of State, that to do that would bring essentially more fire upon Iran, would bring an even stronger U.S. response than what we've already seen. And then there's this discussion about potentially closing the Strait of Hormuz, which would have a massive impact on commercial shipping around the world.
So let's start with what Iran possibly could do in the short term, and what it is threatening to do, and what it has threatened to do in the past. And its options are limited because, by the way, today, all day, the Israeli military has been pounding Iran, has been following on from these American strikes. Just a short while ago was an announcement that the Israeli military bombed a missile engine production facility for the IRGC, so the engines for those ballistic missiles that are flying at Israel. And there were more Iranian missiles that were fired at Israel today, just shortly after the U.S. strikes. So there already has been a kind of response against Israel with almost 30 ballistic missiles fired at Haifa and Tel Aviv, causing dozens of injuries, no reports of fatalities at this stage. Israel is already in a state of heightened alert. But will they go after the United States despite these very overt, very clear, very bellicose threats from President Trump and his administration? They can't attack the United States directly with any military power. They don't have jets with the kind of range to attack the United States. They don't have missiles that could reach the United States, which leaves potential terrorism as an option to hit the U.S., or more likely the concern is some sort of action in the region, either by Iran or one of their proxies. But it is a very different situation now than it was a few years ago. Hezbollah, Hallie, their most powerful proxy. We've been talking about Hezbollah for years. A Hezbollah spokesman just said a short while ago that they don't want part of this fight. They're going to stick to the terms of the ceasefire. The spokesman said that Iran is a powerful country enough, it can defend its own interests. We are going to stick by our ceasefire. That would have been an unimaginable statement from Hezbollah a year or two ago before it was decimated in Lebanon. Hezbollah was the main sword that was hanging over Israel's neck, wielded by Iran, and that sword has been broken in half. So the ability of the militias to respond is limited. Iraqi militias have threatened to attack U.S. bases. They say they have a plan to do that. There is a Hezbollah version in Iraq. specifically that has promised a reprisal. They said they could target American aircraft flying in the skies over Iraq. So there is a possibility that one of these groups could act with or without coordination with Iran, by the way. These militias operate autonomously. They can raise their own funding. They are supported by Iran, but they aren't entirely dependent, and they aren't entirely dependent on, especially now that Iran's resources are diminished. In terms of the Strait of Hormuz, do you want to get into that? That was a statement from a member of parliament suggesting that Iran's response would be to close the Straits of Hormuz. Well, you cover parliament in the United States. They can say anything they want. Right now, Iran has taken a humiliating blow. The American planes were crisscrossing the skies, and the Iranian military didn't even respond. So, of course, Iranian lawmakers are going to be threatening fire and brimstone. Will they carry it out? Even this lawmaker said, this is what we would like to do, is close the Straits of Hormuz, but it's a decision for the supreme leader. It's a decision for the ultimate Security Council. So their capacity and their willingness potentially to carry out something, I think, is not necessarily what it was before. And it also, I think we've been looking at the Middle East for long enough to realize that this region views time very differently. The Americans keep asking about what's going to happen in the next 48 hours, 72 hours. The bigger concern, how a country like Iran waits it out, how the Taliban waited it out. They have presence. They are in the region. They have history in the region. They wait it out. They play the long game. How is this going to end in 10 years, 15 years? I think that's probably the bigger question, and one that Iranians are thinking about. How they respond immediately, if they respond at all, and how do they turn this around in the long term, the way it turned around in their favor in Iraq, and ultimately turned around in the favor of the Taliban in Afghanistan.
You also have the response from others in the international community, Richard, from Europe, for example, where you have heard about this de-escalation, to China, to Russia, which is involved, of course, in its own war in Ukraine as well.
So China and Russia have been the only countries, they're both allies of Iran. They both, not ideological allies, but they have mutual interests, and they're very pragmatic. China gets oil from Iran very cheaply because Iranian oil is tainted, it is sanctioned, so therefore they have to sell it at a great discount to China, and China, it benefits immensely from that. Russia gets drones from Iran, and they benefit immensely from that because they ran out of artillery a long time ago, firing it at Ukrainian soldiers, so they're using Iranian drones. They have both come out and condemned this action, with China specifically calling on Israel to come up and step forward and achieve a ceasefire. But neither of them have said that they're going to get involved in this militarily, that they're going to put any skin in the game. They're just calling for a ceasefire and an end to this military action.
So, Richard, as you look at your reporter's notebook, so to speak, and your point is taken here on Iran looking at this in a long-term time frame here over the course of years, if not decades, versus the U.S., and I think at the moment looking at days and weeks, what is the next shoe to drop that you are waiting for, that you are watching to see?
Well, I think it would be do one of these militia groups. Oh, I forgot to mention the Houthis. There are quite a few proxies, not nearly as many as before and not nearly as powerful as they were before. The Houthis are promising some sort of reprisal. So they have gone on the record, so to speak, more brave than the other militias. But the ones that are on the record this far, Hezbollah in Iraq and the Houthis saying that they will act in some capacity at a time and place of their choosing. I think it's very possible that they do. I think it's very possible that Iran does fire on an American base, potentially trying to do some sort of symbolic attack. Maybe they fire on an empty base, hoping that it sends a message to their military that they haven't given in completely, but fall short of the threshold of provoking a U.S. response. That's what they did after the death of Qasem Soleimani. But it was very dangerous. I was there on the base shortly after the Iranians fired ballistic missiles at the Al-Assad base, and no Americans were killed, and President Trump called off a reprisal. but it was very close. There were several contractors who were concussed and were very close, and had they not been sort of standing behind certain pieces of reinforced concrete, they would have been dead. There was a mess hall that almost got hit by one of these incoming ballistic missiles. So if Iran, even back then, had fired this missile a few inches to the left or right, it could have suffered an enormous reprisal. So I'd be surprised right now if Iran, in these next day, I'm often surprised, so it could happen, but I would be surprised if in this day or two, while they're still under attack, decide to take on the U.S. Directly, maybe let one of their last surviving proxies that is already promising to do it try something. At least they have the air of deniability.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.
Man, sheesh, guys. Shit's getting crazy. Right now, that gold, if it goes back above this area here, I think I'll look for buys for the night. It was showing a lot of sell momentum, but the way it's pushing up right now is really bullish. There it is. It's pushing. Very nice. Pushing up, guys. See how quickly it changed from a buy, from a sell to a buy? It's crazy. Now it's trying to reach top Bollinger Band 1 minute, 30-second time frame. But first it'll have to break this area here, middle Bollinger Band.
We know that obviously Hamas and Hezbollah have been severely degraded. I should just say that we're now hearing an alert, which is an indication that we...
So these are the alerts that go out on all of our phones when you're in...
Tonight I can report to the world.
Was that your sense in D.C.?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I got a text from my producer, my response was a 4-letter word beginning with S, because we'd thought that, having heard this 2-week deadline on Thursday, that at least it would take a little bit longer than that. But you know, there are a few options here. One is that it was a ruse. One is that those words from the Iranian foreign minister in Geneva, and then again later on, you know, made them make up their minds pretty quickly. The other option, of course, is that Donald Trump, you know, has been sort of baited a little bit about his 2-week deadlines, you know, which he's had a few of, and they've come and gone. And you never know whether that may have played into this calculation as well.
So it's weakened the mountain where some of the nuclear plants are in Iran. It's weakened the regime. We'll discuss if it's polarized Donald Trump's base, which is a large part of it was don't get us involved in any wars. But let's go to you first, Gordon. You said the scale of this might be worth talking about. So just in bullet points, what has the US dropped, what ordnance and where?
Well, it's dropped a number of these massive ordnance penetrators, the bunker busters as they're known, which are designed to burrow down through concrete and hit sites. Now, it's interesting because they've not just hit Fordo, which was the site that everyone was expecting them to hit, which was in the mountain, but also Natanz and Isfahan, 2 other nuclear sites. So that already was a surprise. So more of those, if you like, than was expected, and also with multiple munitions because you're trying to use them to burrow down. And then they've also fired Tomahawk cruise missiles at sites as well. So it is a broader campaign, I think, than was expected. Because I think the idea, I'm sure, from the American military planners was if you're going to go in and try and do as much damage as you can. I think what we are waiting for is the kind of what they call the battle damage assessment. In other words, how much damage has this actually done? And that's crucial, because it's not a question of how many munitions you drop and what they're called. What matters is what they do and were they effective or not. And Iran, of course, has said, minimal damage to some of these sites, and they would say that, wouldn't they? But we don't really know how effective they've been. And the Americans Donald Trump talked about the sites being obliterated. So you've got two very contrasting narratives there about how effective that is, and that matters because we do not know whether these sites really are destroyed, how deeply protected they are. We also don't know, for instance, whether they moved some of the highly enriched uranium out of them to different places, which could also be protected. So the idea that it's all done, even with a bigger strike than we expected, I think it's certainly too soon to tell with that. And there might be quite a lot of dispute about the facts as well.
It's interesting, though, Gary, Donald Trump has already said if Iran doesn't make peace, they might do it again. He's suggested he's completely willing not for this to be one and done, but actually maybe 2, 3, 4 and go on.
Yeah, I mean, there's a confusing message there, isn't there? Because the messaging initially was very much one and done. And then, as you say, when he made his address, we got this, you've got to choose peace or tragedy, and we've got plenty more sites, and it's going to be a lot easier next time, he said. And at the same time, they're saying, no regime change, that's not what we're after. So there's a whole multiplicity of messages, and it's very difficult to know. And they certainly don't necessarily line up with Israeli war aims here either, do they? Because certainly those far-right parts of Benjamin Netanyahu's government have been much more explicit about decapitating the regime in Iran and replacing it. So that could all fall apart. But the assessment of the damage will be crucial, because you can't possibly know 50 minutes after the bombs have dropped that there's been complete and total obliteration. You just can't know.
And someone on the podcast has to say this is a regime with many malevolent actors in it, and directly accused of sponsoring terrorism in different parts of the world, of obviously fighting a proxy war with Israel, with Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis. And so we put that out there. But your eminent Laura, I was just going to say to Gary, just in a couple of sentences, the US argument, A, the Democrats, what are they saying? B, the MAGA people, I thought they didn't really vote for war, did they? I thought they said America first, thanks.
They voted very much not for war. And I think, Donald Trump would certainly not want to put boots on the ground in any situation. And I think he sees this as a step or a couple of steps before that. If you were bombing from tens of thousands of feet and sending cruise missiles from hundreds of miles away, it's a kind of television war. And I think that's what they'll be relying on. But it will all depend on the nature of Iranian retaliation. If that hits home and hits hard and starts touching softer targets as well as military targets, that kind of thing, then the power of American public opinion can turn what was a sort of fantastic military exercise into something much more difficult politically at home. And that is the risk for him, where this fracture already exists and could get wider.
So on that question of retaliation, we were lucky this morning. The Iranian ambassador to the UK came into the studio to speak to us. It was the first time that he has spoken to the BBC. And we all remember newscasters, I know you know this, but we should say there's no free reporting in Iran. So it's very often very hard to work out exactly what's going on. And the regime does not like free reporting, and they do not always tell the truth. But when we had the ambassador on this morning, he was very clear that retaliation, he wouldn't say specifically what, was very much on the table, that Iran had many different options to look at. And he's told us this morning that these attacks were a violation of Iran's sovereignty.
There is no doubt this attack is a violation of the United Nations Charter, and as well as armed aggression to the Iranian national sovereignty and Iranian territorial integrity.
Gordon, in terms of the options for Iran and how they may hit back, we often hear sort of blood-curdling language from them. But given they've been under attack from the Israelis for a couple of weeks, they've gone after and killed many of their military leaders, they've degraded many of their facilities. What are the potential options?
Well, it was interesting. I thought your very interesting interview with the ambassador this morning. He was very careful not to outline any options. He was very cautious about getting into specifics and saying they'll consider it, because it's a big call for the Iranians.
No moves, man. I must still stay here, watch the news, see what's going on, guys. and see, you know, how I could get good trading opportunities for us. By tomorrow, later on tonight and tomorrow, it should be clear enough for me to be able to send a signal if it's buying. So I guess I just have to wait for the move to kind of give me an opportunity. But overall, yeah, this trade, don't rush into it. Let the move come to you guys. If you rush into it, you're gonna mess up this week. Don't rush into nothing. Let the money come to you. So if you guys stay focused, man, and practice that, worst case scenario, you're not going to lose no money. So just do your best, guys, and be ready to trade, have money in your account, all of that. With that being said, that's pretty much it for today's session. Again, it's earlier in the week, no setup, no clear moves. We sit on our hands and we wait for the next opportunities. That's all. Talk soon.